This is the Toss-Up, where we take a look at some of the topics facing the world of sports and then we dive deeper. Whether it's your best friend's fantasy team or the future of college athletics, we're just trying to expand the conversation. We just want to take a look at the topics that keep you tuned in to the beautiful world of sports. There hasn't been a three-peat in the NHL in close to 40 years. The New York Islanders were the last to do it in '83. But we could be in the midst of the next legendary sports dynasty to accomplish the oh-so-difficult feat of winning 3 straight championships. The Pittsburgh Penguins won the last 2 Stanley Cup titles and jumped out to an early series lead against the Flyers on Wednesday night by a score of 7-0. But they aren't the only intriguing storyline as the playoffs ramp up. The Vegas Golden Knights ran through the regular season in impressive fashion in just their first year of existence. And, of course, we have to address the age-old question of, could this be the Capitals' year? The next 2 months will be filled with excitement, heroics, and most importantly, answers. Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Dugan. Joining me on the panel this week, we have Stefan Kreisnick for the IDS reporter, our very own IUS TV co-sports director, Ben Wolfson, and IDS reporter, Cameron Drummond. Guys, it's playoff time. It's playoff time. It's exciting. Are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay, so first question, looking back before we look forward, who is the MVP of the regular season to you?
Well, I think there's a lot of candidates this year. It's such a wide open field, but I would have to give it to Claude Giroux from Philadelphia simply because when you look at what he means to his team, there's very few players in the league that are the only real huge big name on their team, and I think that's what Claude is for the Flyers. And to be honest, I don't think they would be anywhere near where they are right now if it wasn't for him. So I like saying that the most valuable player award goes to the most valuable player, and I think this year that's going to be Claude Giroux.
Right, that's a good point, but I think I'm going to take it a little farther with the most important person to the team, and that's Nate McKinnon in Colorado. You have Taylor Hall, Giroux, McKinnon, even Connor McDavid, but his team's terrible, so I'm not going to count him. But basically, McKinnon is carrying his team on his back. To be honest, I can't really think of anyone else on that team worth noting. It's literally McKinnon that brought them to the playoffs.
There's so many great stories in the league, and that's why we love the NHL, right? Because of the parity, any team can kind of rise up and win the Stanley Cup. But there's been no story that's been kind of more surprising than the Vegas Golden Knights and what they've done this year. And William Karlsson has been such a huge reason for that. Again, the guy who leads the league in plus-minus, a guy who's really carried that team, become the face of that team in their first year in the league, and someone who, along with the rest of the Golden Knights, has just kind of captured the imagination of that city with their performance so far in the regular season. He's my pick for the most valuable player.
That's a good segue to my next question, which is the biggest surprise of the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got to go with the obvious answer here. It's the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, coming in, they really had no type of expectations, no type of real shot. Even in Vegas, people weren't picking them to win it all. They were 100-1 odds heading into the season. So, I mean, an inaugural team to be even decent is amazing, let alone to be a number 1 seed heading into the playoffs. Just goes to show how amazing of a storyline this is, and it's impressive that they have a shot. So I think they're definitely the biggest surprise.
Yeah, that's a good choice, but I think I'm going to go up north to Canada and take the Winnipeg Jets. They are definitely not a consistent playoff team. When they moved back to Winnipeg, they were consistently in the bottom, but they built up. They have a lot of veteran experience. They have a lot of young guys, Patrick Laine, and now I think they are a top competitor in the West to make it into the final.
You talk about Winnipeg. I'm going all the way back to when Winnipeg was the Atlanta Thrashers for my surprise team. We're talking about the New Jersey Devils, a team that hasn't been in the postseason since the 2011-2012 campaign. They're sneaking into the playoffs in the Eastern Conference as a wild card. Got a tough matchup against the Tampa Bay Lightning, but you look at a team that's really recovered from 4 or 5 years of futility to get there, back in the playoffs, back in with a shot. And like I mentioned before, anything can happen in the playoffs. So just by getting into the show, they have a chance to punch their ticket to a championship.
Opposite end of the question. The biggest disappointment of the regular season was?
Man, it hurts for me to say this coming from Northwest Indiana, but it's got to be the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, coming in, they're one of the most highly rated teams with a lot of off-season transactions. They got Brandon Saad, and he struggled this year. I don't think they got exactly what they expected out of Patrick Sharp. So they started the season with a big victory against the 2-time defending champs, the Penguins, and they were on a little bit of a hot streak at the beginning, and then it's all kind of been downhill since December and January. So to me, they're the biggest disappointment this year.
Yeah, I think the problem with the Hawks was they were trying to just bring the band back together, and they're all old, like Sharp. Sod is pretty good. He's a Pittsburgh guy, so I respect him. But they traded away Panarin, who is dominating in Columbus right now. But I'm going to stay in Canada with Edmonton Oilers. They opened the season as Stanley Cup favorites with the Penguins, equal odds, and they've just been awful. They got Connor McDavid, who's either him or Sidney Crosby is the best player in the NHL right now. Draisaitl, who played great with him, and just a bunch of young talent. And it's just confusing to me how they couldn't figure it out. And I think it starts with their organization because they trade away big stars like Taylor Hall, and that GM always finds a way to mess up no matter where he is.
But you talk about trying to bring the band back together. It's kind of what the Dallas Stars tried to do this year, bringing back Ken Hitchcock as coach from the '99 Stanley Cup championship team, and that didn't work out too well. You look at all the talent assembled on that team up front: Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, two dominant scorers who can take over a game at a given time. And they even had an established goaltender come back with a big trade to get Ben Bishop. But what really hurt the Stars, I think, was just the way things fell apart. They collapsed in the last month of the season, had an injury to Ben Bishop. Kari Lehtinen, his backup, came in, didn't play effectively as well, kind of contributed some losses with some soft goals allowed, and just the entire way that thing fell apart in the final maybe 5-6 weeks of the season for the Stars leaves a really sour taste in their mouth heading into the offseason, again, without a spot in the NHL playoffs.
All right, before we continue the discussion, let's toss it over to Spencer Aber at the reporter window. Spencer?
Thanks, Michael. The Washington Capitals have made the Stanley Cup playoffs in 10 of the last 11 seasons. In those 10 years, they have never made it past the second round. They have won the President's Trophy 3 times, finishing with the best record in the league. Alexander Ovechkin has been the league's leading goal scorer 6 times. He's also been the league's MVP 3 times. The Capitals have had a goaltender in Braden Holtby, who has been regarded as a top goalie in the entire league. They have had top players around Ovechkin and Holtby, such as Nicholas Backstrom, TJ Oshie, John Carlson, and Evgeny Kuznetsov, but still can't win. Is this a knock on Alexander Ovechkin? A little bit. He could go down as the best player ever to not win a Stanley Cup. That's hard to believe. And Ovechkin is not getting any younger, too. He's 32 years old and has played in almost every game of his long NHL career. That's a lot of tear on your body as you continue to get older. Ovechkin is not the only one at fault for this team's postseason struggles. The entire team has struggled to finish a series. The Capitals have lost 7 series in which it has gone to 7 games. It seems as if the Capitals just can't handle the pressure of being a contender in the playoffs. Losing in the playoffs seems contagious in Washington, D.C., as the Nationals have never made it past the NLDS, and the Wizards haven't made it past the second round of the NBA playoffs in recent years. The time is now for the Capitals, as Ovechkin will not be there forever. They finished on top of the Metropolitan Division once again, but it will mean nothing if they can't reach at least the conference finals. Will this be the year, or will it be another year of choking for the Washington Capitals? We'll have to find out. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Spencer. Now, he touched on it a little bit. Ovechkin had 49 goals this year, the leading goal scorer in the NHL. Is this the year the Capitals finally get over the hump?
Well, I mean, in my personal opinion, I don't think they're going to get over the hump this year. I mean, they certainly have a great roster, as they do every year. Holtby's been a great goalie for them, and obviously we know how great Ovechkin and Backstrom are, on that front line for them. But I just don't see it happening with how good the Eastern Conference is this year. What the Washington Capitals have done in the past, there's just nothing to convince me that this is the year for them.
Yeah, I'm not a big Capitals fan, and I think I agree with you. They will not make it out of the second round because they have to get through Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is 7-2 in playoff series against Washington, and yeah, a lot of people are saying that they're being under the radar may be a good thing for them, but I think it's just gonna be equally as bad. You mentioned Braden Holtby, but he didn't even win the starting job for the opening of the playoffs. They're going to their backup, so who has no playoff experience. So it's going to be really interesting. Ovi's going to have to step up. He's had some playoff success, so I really don't think he's the problem. But yeah, it all starts with getting through Pittsburgh, assuming Pittsburgh beats the Flyers. But I think they'll choke again.
Yeah, we might as well just answer that question with a collective no from all 3 of us. I mean, the Rock the Red Caps kind of have never worked before, so why would they work now, that kind of theory. I mean, to Stefan's point, well, the Eastern Conference is just so deep this year. You look at the list: Toronto, Pittsburgh, Tampa, Boston. There's so many obstacles to them maybe even reaching the Eastern Conference Finals, let alone reaching the Stanley Cup Finals. And it's not like you have that kind of past history from really anyone on their roster to draw upon. You talk about Ovechkin as the most seasoned player with so many miles on him. None of those miles have resulted in a Stanley Cup appearance so far.
Now, what's a team that is not getting a lot of attention that could surprise us?
Well, it's almost ironic to say, but I'm going to go with the Nashville Predators. I mean, they're the #1 overall seed heading into the playoffs, but they don't seem to be talked about that much. I mean, obviously Vegas and, you got Washington and even Toronto are stealing headlines, but everyone's kind of sleeping on the Predators for some reason. I mean, they made it to the finals last year. They got the President's Cup this year, so there's really no reason to believe that they don't have what it takes to win it all. I know it's boring to pick the team that's been good all year. Everyone likes the shiny new team like the Knights, but I think people are sleeping on the Predators this year.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go towards Toronto in the East, and in the West, Winnipeg. These playoffs are my favorite this year because normally, like every year, you get like 2 or 3 teams that might have a chance to win. But I could honestly see like 5 teams having a shot. In the East, you got Toronto, and they drew Boston in the first round, which is rough. But their starting goalie has really good success against the Bruins, and I think they'll want to avenge that 2013 Game 7 blow up. They lost pretty badly. They blew a big lead to them. In the West, Winnipeg has been playing under the radar because they don't get much coverage in the U.S., and I think Patrick Laine is really good.
Ben and I were just talking about this before the show, but Tampa Bay is a team that, after missing the playoffs last year, had repeated runs to the Eastern Conference Finals, into the Stanley Cup Finals the past 2 or 3 years before that. They're back this year with a vengeance, and they really haven't gotten a lot of coverage. Again, you talked about how Winnipeg doesn't get a lot of coverage being a Canadian team. Those teams down in Florida, down towards the southeastern part of the U.S., you don't see them on the NBCSN games or the national market games too much. So I'm looking for Tampa to make a run in the West. Or the East, excuse me.
We're going to cut to break here real quick. But coming up after the break, our panel will play Make Your Case, and we're going to do our lightning round. So stick with us. Welcome back to the Toss-Up. We're talking NHL playoffs, but before we keep going, let's toss it over to Stefan at the media wall.
Thanks, Michael. As the NHL playoffs are underway, there are numerous headlines to look at. The Pittsburgh Penguins will look to three-peat, while the favorites to win it, the Nashville Predators, will look to bring home the cup for the first time. You add those teams to a list including the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Winnipeg Jets, and you have yourself a wide-open race to the top. And in the NHL playoffs, we know anything is possible, even the seemingly impossible. The Vegas Golden Knights have taken the hockey world by storm during their inaugural season. The Knights come into the playoffs with the 5th most points in the league, and they have broken just about every record for a team in their inaugural season. The team that virtually had no expectations heading into the season quickly gained headlines when they united the Vegas community just days after the city suffered the largest mass shooting in U.S. history. Now the city has become a place where fans get exactly what they ask for. The Knights own the best record of any team and could have home ice advantage the majority of the time. Oh, and their play on the ice isn't too bad either. The Knights have William Karlsson, who owns the best plus-minus in the league. They also have Marc-Andre Fleury, a goalie with the league's 2nd best goals against average and 3 Stanley Cups under his belt. The team has also gotten a lot of help from veterans such as James Neal and David Perron. Vegas has stolen the hearts of many hockey fans with their fascinating storyline and humorous Twitter account, but now it will be different for the Vegas Knights, as teams will be playing them for the 4th or 5th time this season, as in the case with their first-round opponent, the LA Kings. The Golden Knights have dealt with first times all season. Now they deal with their first playoffs. The team that has been a Cinderella story all season is just 16 hard-fought wins away from the perfect fairy tale ending. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Stefan, and quite the storyline brewing in the Vegas Golden Knights. All right, guys, time for the lightning round. There is one rule, and that one rule is you have to keep your answers at 10 seconds or less. Are we ready?
Let's do it.
First question, Eastern Conference champ.
I'm going to go with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
I mean, it's got to be Pittsburgh. No one's beaten them in the past 2 years.
Yeah, I'll go with the Boston Bruins. I don't want to three-peat Boston Bruins.
Western Conference champ.
I'm going to go with Nashville.
Yeah, Nashville's cruising.
I'd want to say the Vegas Golden Knights so bad, but I'm going to go with the Nashville Predators.
All right, no explanation here, just the team. Stanley Cup champion.
Nashville Predators.
Three-peat Pittsburgh.
Boston. Go with the Bruins.
All right, make your case. You guys can go longer than 10 seconds here, as long as you'd like. One question. Your team that you just picked to win the Stanley Cup, make your case for why they are going to hoist the cup.
Well, I think you got to start with Nashville. You know, in the NHL playoffs, how important goaltending is, and I think they got Pecorino, an experienced goaltender that has what it takes to lead them to the top and give them their first title. I mean, like I had mentioned earlier, they're not the shiny new team that everyone's into. They were good last year. They made it to the finals. They've been good all throughout this season, almost steamrolling. They have such a great record on the road, which could end up being very, very vital in a big run. So, in my opinion, I really don't see a team that can take down Nashville. We mentioned it's a very wide open playoffs, but in my opinion, I think Nashville's going to take it all this year.
Yeah, so I could just say Phil Kessel is a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, and my case is sold. But the Penguins, I would say, are maybe not the best team on paper, but the most complete team. They have Matt Murray, who's 23 years old, and has 2 Stanley Cups. He's 2 for 2. Phil Kessel got traded to the Penguins. He's 2 for 2 with Cups. Sidney Crosby, I don't need to say much about him. There was an NHL Network analyst that said he's addicted to winning. And you saw the game Wednesday night, 7-0. He had a natural hat trick. He was amazing. And then Evgeny Malkin, who is so underrated because of Crosby. I think if he wasn't on the Penguins, he'd be looked at as possibly equally as good as Crosby. He plays with just an attitude and just an enthusiasm, and it is awesome to watch.
Yeah, my case for the Boston Bruins over the Nashville Predators actually relies more on me being against Nashville kind of than for Boston. I just think kind of Nashville got caught up last year with the whole Smashville persona in the Stanley Cup Finals. A lot of energy in that city. Everyone was wearing their yellow jerseys throughout Nashville, Tennessee. But I just think that energy will kind of dissipate in year 2 of it. And I think that Boston especially has an experience and a culture of winning that we've seen really stretching back for the last decade. The TD Garden becomes a very difficult place to play in the playoffs, which is why I think they can get past teams like Pittsburgh and Toronto if they encounter them in the Eastern Conference. Ben seems to disagree with me, but I think that could be the case. And I think that if they are able to get past a team like a Pittsburgh or a Toronto, they could ride that momentum into the Stanley Cup Finals. And since I'm going to pick Nashville as my Western Conference champion, that would be the team that they would get past in the finals.
All right, well, as we near the end of our discussion, what's everybody's last word on the Stanley Cup playoffs?
I think thrilling is my word. We all know the Stanley Cup playoffs are so wide open. Fans get so into it. The stadiums are so full of energy, and I think it's just thrilling to watch and know that no matter where they're playing or who's playing, that it's a wide open game and anyone can win, especially when you go into overtime.
Well, I've just got one word, and that is 3 leave.
3 leave, really?
3 leave.
Okay, my word is just incredible, because you talk about the two sports, maybe baseball and hockey, with maybe some casual fans that don't really get into it until the playoffs, but when the playoffs do happen, those casual fans are locked into the games for hours on end. You're watching random Canadian teams you've never seen play before, maybe on a regular season game, play at 9:30 o'clock at night just because the game's going into triple overtime or something like that. So it really lures fans in, kind of traps them in, which is good for the sport, good for the product, and obviously good for the entertainment value as well.
You guys nailed it, although I do like Ben's word the best. Ben gets bonus points for that word right there.
Just trying to further his Pittsburgh propaganda, that's all that is.
Hey, they're clearly the best team. No one's beat them.
We'll find out.
See about that.
We'll find out. That does it for the show this week, guys. Be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter page at IUSTV Sports and on Facebook at IUSTV Sports. You can always give any suggestions for the show and ask any questions you may have. Toss it up. Find out if we'll catch it. We'll see you next time.